The rain came down hard that Tuesday night, turning the expensive streets of Manhattan into rivers of reflected light. Inside his black Mercedes, billionaire Richard Chen barely noticed the weather. His driver navigated through the traffic while Richard scrolled through his phone, checking stock prices and answering emails that couldn't wait until morning. He'd just left the Grand Pavilion Hotel, where the city's wealthiest people had gathered for their annual charity gala. The theme this year was fighting homelessness. Richard had written a check for $500,000 without blinking. The applause had been warm, the handshakes firm, and everyone told him what a generous man he was. He felt good about it. He always did after these events. "Sir, there's heavy traffic ahead. Should I take the side streets?" his driver asked. "Yes, whatever gets us home faster," Richard replied, not looking up from his phone. The car turned onto a quieter avenue, one lined with high-end boutiques and art galleries that closed at 6. The streetlights cast an orange glow over the wet pavement. That's when Richard saw her. At first, it was just a shape huddled in a doorway. The city was full of homeless people, and Richard had learned long ago to look past them. Not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. You couldn't help everyone, his father had taught him. You'd go crazy trying. But something made him look twice this time. Maybe it was the way the blanket covered her head, or the shopping bag she clutched close to her chest. Something felt familiar. "Stop the car," Richard said suddenly. His driver hit the brakes, surprised. "Sir, just stop. I'll be a moment." Richard stepped out into the rain, his $1,000 suit getting soaked immediately. He walked slowly toward the doorway, his heart beating faster with each step. The woman had her face turned away from the street, pressed against the shop's glass door. She was trying to disappear, to be as small as possible. "Excuse me," Richard said gently. The woman flinched and pulled her blanket tighter. I'm sorry. "I'll move. Just please don't call the police," that voice. Richard knew that voice, Maria, he said, his own voice barely above a whisper. The woman turned slowly, and even in the dim light, Richard could see her eyes widen with recognition and then fill with shame. It was her, Maria Lopez, the woman who had cleaned his penthouse apartment every Tuesday and Thursday for 3 years. The woman who always had a smile for him, who remembered how he liked his coffee, who once spent an hour helping him find his late mother's ring when he thought he'd lost it. "Mr. Chen," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, I can explain. I'm so sorry you have to see me like this." She started gathering her things, 2 worn shopping bags and a backpack that had seen better days. Her hands were shaking and she wouldn't look at him. She was trying to leave, to run away from her embarrassment. "Maria, wait, please." Richard held up his hands. "Don't go. I'm not here to judge you." She stopped, but she still wouldn't meet his eyes. "I'll come to work tomorrow. I promise. I haven't missed a day. I always come on time. You can ask anyone." "I know you do," Richard said. "You're always on time. You do excellent work." The rain kept falling. Richard's security guard had gotten out of the car and was standing a respectful distance away, watching carefully. Traffic rushed by on the main avenue, people hurrying home to their warm apartments and families. And here they stood, a billionaire and his cleaning lady, separated by every possible barrier society could create, yet connected by 3 years of brief morning conversations and polite nods. Richard did something then that surprised even himself. He sat down on the wet concrete beside her. "Mr. Chen, your suit," Maria gasped. "It's just a suit, Maria. I have dozens of them." He leaned back against the glass door, feeling the cold seep through his clothes. "Will you sit with me for a minute, please?" Slowly, hesitantly, Maria lowered herself back down to the ground. She kept her distance, pressed against the far side of the doorway. The space between them might as well have been a canyon. "How long?" Richard asked quietly. "How long what?" "How long have you been sleeping on the streets?" Maria was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was so soft he had to lean closer to hear. 5 weeks, 5 weeks. Richard's mind raced. 5 weeks meant 10 cleaning appointments. She'd come to his home 10 times, smiled at him, cleaned his floors, made small talk about the weather, and then walked out his door to sleep on the street. He'd never noticed, never asked, never saw beyond her professional mask. "Maria," he said carefully, "you don't have to tell me anything you don't want to, but I'd like to understand, not as your employer, just as someone who cares." She looked at him then, really looked at him, searching his face for something. Maybe sincerity, maybe trustworthiness. Whatever she found must have been enough because she started talking. My daughter, Isabella. She's 17. Smart as a whip, wants to be a doctor. Maria's face softened when she mentioned her daughter the way every mother's does. Last year she got sick. Really sick. The doctor said it was leukemia. Richard's chest tightened. He nodded for her to continue. The treatment, it's experimental. Our insurance, it doesn't cover everything. Not even close. The bills started coming. 10,000 here, 20,000 there. I worked 3 jobs, Mr. Chen. Cleaning for you in the mornings, office buildings at night, and weekends at Joe's Diner on 42nd Street. I thought I could manage. I really did. She pulled her thin blanket closer around her shoulders. But then Isabella got worse. She needed me home. Needed someone to take her to treatments, to be there when she got sick from the medicine. I had to quit 2 of my jobs. Just kept yours because it paid the best and the hours let me take care of her. Where's Isabella now? Richard asked. With my sister in Brooklyn. Her apartment is tiny, just 1 bedroom. She's got 3 kids of her own. There's no room for both of us. So Isabella stays there, sleeps on the couch, and She gestured around the doorway. I make do. Your rent? Couldn't pay it. Got evicted 6 weeks ago. Tried shelters, but they're full, and the ones that have space. She trailed off, shaking her head. I've heard stories. Bad stories. Out here, at least I know what I'm dealing with. Richard sat in silence, processing everything. This woman, who he'd seen maybe twice a week for 3 years, had been fighting a private war that he'd never even imagined. While he'd been writing checks for $500,000 at charity galas, his own employee was choosing between a roof and her daughter's medicine. The medical bills, he started, but Maria cut him off. I'm not asking for charity. Mr. Chen, I'm not telling you this to get your money. You asked, and I'm being honest, but I don't want your pity. I've got my pride left, even if I don't have much else. There was steel in her voice now, a dignity that homelessness hadn't stripped away. Richard respected that. He understood it even. Pride was sometimes all a person had. I know you're not asking, Richard said, but I'm going to help anyway. Not because I pity you, Maria. Because it's the right thing to do. Because you've been taking care of my home for 3 years, and I should have been paying attention to whether someone was taking care of you. Maria shook her head. Mr. Chen, you pay me fair wages. More than fair. This isn't your fault. Life just happens sometimes. Bad luck? Maybe, Richard said. But I'm about to tell you something, and I need you to believe me. Can you do that? She nodded slowly. By this time tomorrow, everything will be different. I promise you that. Maria's eyes filled with tears. Don't make promises you can't keep. I've heard too many of those. Richard pulled out his phone and made a call. His assistant answered on the first ring, despite the late hour. David, I need you to book a room at the Lexington Hotel. Best room they have available. Tonight. Bill it to my personal account. Of course, sir. May I ask who it's for? Maria Lopez. She'll be checking in within the hour. He looked at Maria, who was staring at him with wide eyes. And David? Have room service send up dinner. A real dinner. Whatever she wants. He ended the call and turned back to Maria. That's for tonight. Tomorrow we start fixing everything else. I can't accept. You can and you will. Maria? I'm not doing this to make myself feel better. Well, maybe partly that, but mostly because you deserve help and I have the means to give it. There's no shame in accepting that. Maria was crying now, quiet tears running down her weathered cheeks. Why? Why are you doing this? Richard thought about the question. Why was he doing this? He'd passed homeless people every day for years without stopping. He'd written checks to charities and felt like that was enough. But sitting here on this cold, wet concrete, looking at a woman he'd seen dozens of times without really seeing her, something had shifted inside him. Because I looked at you tonight and realized I've been blind, he said honestly. Because I spent the evening at a fancy party congratulating myself for caring about homelessness, and then I found you here. Because you kept showing up to clean my home while fighting a battle I never knew existed, and that kind of strength deserves recognition. He stood up and offered his hand. Come on, let's get you to that hotel. Maria took his hand, her grip weak from cold and exhaustion. As she stood, Richard saw how thin she'd become, how the last 5 weeks had hollowed out her cheeks and put dark circles under her eyes. How had he not noticed? His driver brought the car around. The security guard opened the door and Maria hesitated. I'll get the seats wet, she said. They're just seats, Richard replied. Please. She climbed in, moving carefully as if afraid to touch anything. Richard got in beside her and told the driver to take them to the Lexington Hotel first. As they drove through the rain-soaked streets, Maria looked out the window at the city passing by. "I clean these buildings," she said softly. "All these fancy places. I scrub their floors and dust their furniture and make everything shine. And then I leave and try to find a dry place to sleep. It's funny, isn't it?" "In a sad way." "It's not funny," Richard said. "It's wrong. And I'm going to do something about it." Maria turned to look at him. "What can one person do, even a person with all your money? There are thousands like me out there. Millions, maybe. Working hard, trying their best, and still falling through the cracks." She was right, of course. One person couldn't save everyone. But as Richard looked at Maria's tired face, he realized something important. He couldn't save everyone, but he could save someone. He could start with the woman sitting next to him. And maybe if he did this right, he could start something bigger. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I'm going to figure it out. Starting tomorrow, everything changes." The car pulled up to the Lexington Hotel, its golden lights warm and welcoming in the rain. The doorman rushed forward with an umbrella. Maria clutched her shopping bags, looking at the grand entrance with uncertainty. "This is too much," she whispered. "It's not enough," Richard replied, "but it's a start." As they walked into the hotel lobby, Richard's mind was already racing ahead. Maria's story had opened his eyes to something he'd been blind to his entire life, and now that he could see it, he couldn't look away. He wouldn't look away. Tomorrow would bring challenges he couldn't yet imagine. But tonight, at least, Maria Lopez would sleep in a warm bed with a full stomach. It was a small thing in the grand scheme of her problems, but it was something. Sometimes, Richard thought as he watched the hotel clerk hand Maria her room key, sometimes everything big starts with something small, a chance encounter, a moment of recognition, a decision to stop and really see another person. He had no idea how right he was. By tomorrow, both their lives would begin to change in ways neither could predict. But for now, in this moment, it was enough to watch Maria's face as she realized she wouldn't be sleeping on the street tonight. It was more than enough. It was everything. Richard didn't go home that night. After making sure Maria was settled into her hotel room, he returned to his penthouse and went straight to his study. Sleep felt impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Maria huddled in that doorway, clutching her shopping bags like they contained all her worldly possessions. Because they probably did. He sat at his desk and opened his laptop. The screen's blue light filled the dark room as he started typing. Not emails to his usual contacts. Not his lawyers or accountants or the people who normally solved his problems. This required a different approach. By 3 a.m, Richard had contacted 5 private investigators, 2 social workers, and a non-profit director who specialized in helping working families in crisis. He'd always had resources at his fingertips, but he'd never used them like this before. Never turned his business instincts toward understanding why someone like Maria could fall through the cracks so completely. "I need to understand the whole picture," he told the lead investigator, a woman named Patricia who came highly recommended. "Medical bills, housing costs, insurance gaps, everything. And I need it fast, by end of day tomorrow." "That's a tight timeline, Mr. Chen. I'll pay whatever it takes. This matters." Patricia must have heard something in his voice because she didn't argue. "We'll get you answers." At 6 a.m, Richard called his office and cleared his entire schedule. His assistant sounded shocked. In 15 years, Richard had never canceled a full day of meetings. There were board presentations, investment calls, a lunch with potential partners from Singapore. None of it seemed important anymore. "Reschedule everything," he said firmly. "Something came up that can't wait." By 9 o'clock, Patricia called back with her preliminary findings. Richard listened, taking notes, and felt his stomach turn with each new piece of information. Isabella's treatment was costing almost $30,000 a month. Maria's basic insurance covered maybe 40%. The experimental drugs weren't included at all. The hospital had been surprisingly patient about the mounting debt, but even they had limits. Maria owed them over $200,000 and the bills kept coming. But there was more. Patricia had dug deeper, and what she found made Richard's blood run cold. "Mr. Chen, I looked into Chen Industries employee benefits like you asked. Your cleaning staff, they're not technically your employees. They work for Build Bright Services, the contracting company you use. Build Bright provides minimal health coverage, high deductibles, lots of exclusions. It's legal, but barely. Richard had known this, of course. It was standard practice. Hiring through contractors meant fewer overhead costs, less liability, simpler paperwork. Every major corporation did it. He'd never questioned it before. "How many people work in my buildings through contractors?" he asked. "Across all your properties?" "About 240. Cleaning staff, security guards, maintenance workers, receptionists, and some of the smaller offices. 240 people keeping his empire running. And he'd never thought about what benefits they had or didn't have. They were invisible to him, just like Maria had been. "Find out about them," Richard said. "All of them. I want to know who's struggling, who's one emergency away from disaster. That's going to take time and money. I have both." "Do it," Patricia called back 3 hours later. "Mr. Chen, you should sit down for this." She'd worked fast, pulling public records, talking to building managers, even interviewing some workers on their breaks. What she found was a pattern Richard had never seen because he'd never looked. There was Tony, the night security guard at Richard's downtown office building. 53 years old, veteran, living in his car for the past 2 months. His daughter had been in a car accident and the medical bills destroyed his savings. He still showed up to work every night, perfectly groomed, never complained. There was Diana, the receptionist at one of Richard's smaller properties. Type 1 diabetic. Her insulin costs had tripled in the past year. She was rationing it, taking less than she needed, trying to make it stretch. Patricia had caught her checking her blood sugar in the bathroom, hands shaking. There was Robert, a janitor who worked the morning shift in Richard's main building. His wife had dementia. The memory care facility cost $4,000 a month. He was 71 years old and couldn't retire because he needed the insurance, inadequate as it was. The list went on. 12 people total, all working for companies that service Chen Industries, all struggling in silence, all invisible. Richard sat in his study looking at the files Patricia had compiled. Each one had a photo, a name, a story. These weren't statistics. They were people. People who smiled at him in elevators, who kept his buildings clean and safe and running smoothly. People he'd never really seen. His phone rang. It was the hospital where Isabella was being treated. Richard had called them earlier, identifying himself as a friend of the family interested in settling Maria's account. "Mr. Chen, we've reviewed Mrs. Lopez's file. The total outstanding balance is $217,462. However, Isabella's ongoing treatment will require—" "I'll cover all of it," Richard interrupted. "Past bills and future treatment." "Whatever she needs. Send the paperwork to my office." There was a pause. "Sir, that's extremely generous, but the future costs could be substantial." "The experimental treatment program alone? I don't care what it costs." "That girl gets whatever treatment gives her the best chance. Money is not a factor. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir, absolutely." After he hung up, Richard sat quietly for a moment. $200,000. He'd spent more than that on his last vacation. He'd tipped more than that at charity auctions for items he didn't even want. But for Maria, that amount had meant losing everything. He picked up the phone again and called Patricia. "I want to meet them. All 12 people. Today, if possible." "That's not standard procedure, Mr. Chen. Usually we just provide the information." "I need to meet them. Can you arrange it?" By 3 that afternoon, Richard stood outside Tony's car, which was parked in a corner of the office building's garage. Tony had just woken up, getting ready for his night shift. When he saw Richard standing there in his expensive suit, confusion crossed his weathered face. "Mr. Chen? Is something wrong? Did I miss something on my rounds?" "No, Tony, your work is excellent. I actually came to talk to you about something else. Do you have a few minutes?" They sat on a concrete barrier, an odd pair in the dim garage. Tony was wary at first, but Richard asked simple questions. How long had he been working there? How was his daughter recovering? Where did he eat his meals? Did he have enough warm clothes for winter? "Why are you asking me this?" Tony finally said. "No offense, sir, but people like you don't usually care about people like me." "That's the problem," Richard said quietly. I should have. "Can I ask you something, Tony? Why didn't you ask for help?" Tony laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Ask who? I'm 63 years old, living in my car. You think I haven't asked for help? I went to 3 charities. Waiting lists months long. I applied for assistance programs. Denied because I make too much money. You know how crazy that is? I make too much to get help, but not enough to afford rent in this city." Richard nodded slowly. What if things could be different? Different how? I don't know yet, but I'm working on it. Next was Diana, the receptionist with diabetes. Richard met her during her break in a small coffee shop near the building where she worked. She was tiny, probably 90 pounds, with circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. I'm managing, she insisted when Richard asked about her health. It's fine. Patricia told me you're rationing your insulin. Diana's face flushed. That's private medical information. She had no right. She was trying to help, and so am I. Diana, rationing insulin is dangerous. You could die. What choice do I have? Her voice broke. The cost keeps going up. My insurance barely covers anything. I work full-time and I still can't afford to stay alive. That's my reality, Mr. Chen. That's a lot of people's reality. Robert, the janitor with the wife in memory care, broke down crying when Richard found him cleaning the executive bathrooms. I'm sorry, he kept saying. I'm sorry. This is embarrassing. There's nothing to be embarrassed about, Richard said, handing him tissues. You're taking care of someone you love. That's not shameful. I'm so tired, Robert whispered. I'm 71 years old and I'm cleaning toilets because I can't afford to retire. My wife doesn't even remember who I am most days. But I keep going because what else can I do? I can't just abandon her. Richard met all 12 people that day. Each conversation left him feeling heavier, like he was carrying the weight of stories he should have known all along. These weren't lazy people looking for handouts. They were working, some of them 2 or 3 jobs, and still drowning. By the time he returned to his penthouse that evening, Richard's entire worldview had shifted. The city looked different through his windows. All those buildings, all those lights, each one representing thousands of people. How many were like Maria? Like Tony and Diana and Robert? How many were one crisis away from losing everything? His phone buzzed. A text from Maria. Mr. Chen, I can't thank you enough for the hotel. I slept in a real bed. I took a hot shower. I feel human again. But I can't accept any more charity. I'll be back to work Thursday as usual. Richard called her immediately. Maria, about work. I need to talk to you about something. Please don't fire me. I know this is awkward now, but I promise I can keep things professional. I'm not firing you. Actually, I want to offer you a different job. Silence on the other end. Maria, I've spent today learning about people who work in my buildings. People who are struggling just like you were. And I realized something. I have all this money, all these resources, but I don't understand what they actually need. I don't understand their lives. I'm not sure what you're asking. I want to create something, a foundation maybe, or a program, something to help employees who are falling through the cracks, but I can't do it alone. I need someone who understands what it's really like. Someone who knows what these people need because she's been there. You want me to? What? Tell you how to spend your money? More than that. I want you to help me design the whole thing. You'd work directly with me. We'd figure out together how to actually help people, not just throw money at problems. Real solutions. Sustainable ones. Maria was quiet for so long Richard thought the call had dropped. Finally she spoke, her voice careful. Mr. Chen, I appreciate what you did last night. Really, I do. But I'm a cleaning lady. I don't know anything about running programs or foundations. I barely finished high school. You know what it's like to choose between medicine and rent. You know what it's like to work 3 jobs and still fail. You know what help actually looks like versus what sounds good in a boardroom. That's the expertise I need. I don't understand why you're doing this. Richard looked out at the city lights. Because I wrote a check for $500,000 at a charity gala last night, and then I found you sleeping in a doorway. Because I've been giving money to causes for years, but I've never actually solved anything. Because I'm tired of being blind. He paused, then added, and because you deserve a chance. All 12 of you do. You've been holding up my world, and I never even said thank you. Another long silence. Then Maria said, can I think about it? Of course. Take all the time you need. But Maria, I already paid your hospital bills. All of them. And Isabella's future treatment is covered. He heard her sharp intake of breath. You, what? Your daughter is going to get the care she needs. That's not negotiable. Whether you take this job or not, that's already done. Maria was crying now, he could hear it. Why? Why are you doing all this? Because I can. And because once you see something, you can't unsee it. I see you now, Maria. I see all of them. And I can't just go back to not caring. After they hung up, Richard stood at his window for a long time. Tomorrow he'd have to start making real changes. He'd have to convince his board, deal with shareholders, face criticism from people who thought he was crazy. But tonight he'd done something he should have done years ago. He'd listened, really listened. Not to investors or analysts or consultants, but to the people who actually kept his world running. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Maria. When do I start? Richard smiled for the first time all day. He typed back, tomorrow. We have a lot of work to do. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. Millions of people working, struggling, hoping, surviving. Richard couldn't help them all. But he could start. He could try. And sometimes trying was everything. The boardroom on the 42nd floor of Chen Industries had hosted thousands of meetings over the years. Mergers, acquisitions, quarterly reports, strategic planning sessions. The 12 executives sitting around the glass table had seen it all. But they'd never seen anything like this. Richard stood at the head of the table, but instead of the usual presentation on profits and projections, the wall behind him was covered with photographs, faces, real people. Tony standing next to his car, Diana checking her blood sugar, Robert mopping floors, Maria with her daughter Isabella in a hospital room. What's going on, Richard? His CFO, Mr. Harrison, asked. We were supposed to discuss the quarterly earnings today. Change of plans, Richard said. Today we're going to talk about the real cost of how we do business. The executives exchanged confused glances. Richard's assistant had spent the morning helping him prepare this presentation, though even she thought he'd lost his mind. Richard took a deep breath and began. How many of you have ridden the elevator with Tony? He works night security in our downtown building. A few heads nodded uncertainly. Tony is a veteran, served 2 tours overseas. His daughter was in a serious accident 8 months ago. The medical bills wiped out his savings. For the past 2 months, Tony has been living in his car in our parking garage. He showers at a gym. He eats 1 meal a day. Then he puts on his uniform and protects our building all night long. The room went silent. Richard clicked to the next photo. This is Diana. She's been the receptionist at our West Side property for 6 years. She has type 1 diabetes. Her insulin costs have tripled. She's rationing it because her insurance barely covers anything. Do you know what happens when diabetics don't get enough insulin? They go blind. They lose limbs. They die. Mr. Harrison shifted uncomfortably. Richard, what exactly are you getting at? I'm getting at the fact that we're failing these people. They work for companies we contract with. They keep our businesses running. And they're suffering because we choose the cheapest contractors without asking what that really means. That's standard business practice. Another executive spoke up. We're not a charity. We have shareholders to answer to. I'm aware, Richard said coolly. I'm also aware that we made $3.2 billion in profit last year. And while we were celebrating that, Tony was sleeping in his car. He clicked through more photos telling each story. Robert, the 71-year-old janitor caring for his wife with dementia. Carmen, the single mother working 2 jobs who still couldn't afford her son's asthma medication. Paul, the maintenance worker who'd had to choose between fixing his truck and buying groceries. With each story, the room grew more uncomfortable. Some executives wouldn't meet his eyes. Others fidgeted with their phones. Here's what I'm proposing, Richard said, pulling up a document on the screen. The Chen Foundation. We're going to fund it with 20% of my personal wealth to start. That's approximately $400 million. The room erupted. Everyone tried to talk at once. Richard, that's insane. Have you lost your mind? The shareholders will never... Richard held up his hand. I'm not finished. The foundation will provide comprehensive support for every single person who works in or for Chen Industries. Not just direct employees. Everyone. Cleaning staff, security, contractors, everyone. He clicked to the next slide. Full medical coverage. No deductibles. No copays. Mental health services included. Housing assistance for anyone facing eviction or homelessness. Emergency funds for unexpected crises. Childcare support. Education grants. That's financially impossible, Mr. Harrison said flatly. We're talking about thousands of people. The costs would be astronomical. Actually, I had Patricia run the numbers. For full coverage of all 2,400 employees and contractors across all our properties, we're looking at approximately $150 million per year. $150 million, someone gasped, which is less than 5% of our annual profit. Richard continued calmly. We'll also redirect 15% of future company profits to maintain the foundation. I know that sounds like a lot, but consider this. Our employee turnover rate is currently 37%. Do you know what that costs us in training and lost productivity? That's different, is it? When Diana ends up in the hospital because she can't afford insulin, she misses work. When Tony is exhausted from sleeping in his car, his performance suffers. When Robert's stress about his wife affects his health, we lose an experienced worker. We're already paying these costs. We're just doing it in the stupidest, most inhumane way possible. Richard leaned forward, his hands on the table. I've spent the last 2 days really looking at how we operate. And I'm ashamed. We pride ourselves on efficiency, on maximizing profits, on being smart businessmen. But we've been blind to the human cost. These aren't numbers on a spreadsheet. They're people. This is very noble, Richard, another executive said carefully. But it's also naive. Other companies will see this as weakness. They'll undercut us. Shareholders will revolt. You're gambling with the company's future. Maybe, Richard acknowledged. Or maybe we're going to prove that treating people with dignity is actually good business. Maybe we're going to show that when workers aren't terrified of one emergency destroying their lives, they perform better, they stay longer, they care more. And if you're wrong, Mr. Harrison challenged, if this bankrupts the company, what then? Then I'll have failed, Richard said simply. But at least I'll have tried. At least I won't spend another night knowing that people who work for me are sleeping in cars or rationing life-saving medicine while I live in a penthouse. He clicked to the last slide. It was a, quote, simple text on a black background. What good is success if it's built on someone else's suffering? I'm not asking for your permission, Richard continued. The foundation is happening. What I am asking for is your support. Help me make this work. Help me prove that we can be profitable and humane, that those things aren't mutually exclusive. The room was quiet for a long moment. Finally, one of the younger executives, Catherine from operations, spoke up. I want to help. Tell me what you need. Catherine, you can't be serious. Someone started, but she cut them off. My brother lost his job last year. He had cancer. The medical bills destroyed him financially. He's still alive, but he lost his house, his savings, everything. I watched it happen and felt helpless. If we can prevent that for even one person, I'm in. Me too, another voice said. It was Jerome, the head of technology. My sister is a single mother. She works full-time and still can't afford childcare. I've been helping her financially, but not everyone has a brother who can do that. Count me in. Slowly, hesitantly, more executives voiced their support. Not all of them. Mr. Harrison sat stone-faced along with 3 others. But 7 out of 12 was enough. This is a mistake, Mr. Harrison said, standing up. And when it fails, I'll be here to pick up the pieces. But I won't support it. I can't. That's your choice, Richard said quietly. I respect your decision even if I disagree with it. After the meeting ended, Richard felt both exhilarated and terrified. He'd just committed to something that could either change everything or destroy his company. There was no middle ground. His phone rang. It was Maria. Mr. Chen, I just got to the office. Your assistant showed me the workspace. It's bigger than my old apartment. I feel like I'm in over my head. You're not, Richard assured her. You're exactly where you need to be. How's Isabella? The hospital called this morning. They're starting a new treatment protocol next week. They said cost isn't a concern anymore, so they're going with the most aggressive option. They think, her voice caught. They think she has a real chance now. Richard felt his throat tighten. That's wonderful news, Maria. Because of you. My daughter might live because you stopped and looked at me that night. How do I even begin to thank you for that? You helped me make sure we do this right. That's all the thanks I need. Over the next few days, word spread through the company about the foundation. The reactions were mixed. Some employees were skeptical. After years of broken promises from employers, they'd learned not to trust anything that sounded too good to be true. Richard arranged town hall meetings at each property. He showed up personally, stood in front of workers and answered questions. Real questions. Hard questions. What happens when you get bored of this? One security guard asked. Rich people like to play savior, but then they move on to the next thing. What happens to us then? That's a fair concern, Richard said. That's why the foundation isn't dependent on my mood or interest. It's being set up as an independent entity with legal protections and long-term funding. This isn't a pet project. This is a permanent change to how we operate. Why should we believe you? Someone else called out you shouldn't, not yet. Belief comes from action, not words. So watch what we do over the next few months. Hold us accountable. If we fail, tell everyone. If we succeed, tell everyone that too. Tony, the security guard who'd been living in his car, stood up. Mr. Chen found me living in my car last week. Today I signed a lease on an apartment. The foundation covered my deposit and first month's rent. My daughter called me crying because she can't believe I'll have a real address again. So I'm a believer. This man did something no one else would. Diana spoke next, her voice shaking. I got my insulin this morning. The full prescription. No rationing. No choosing between medicine and food. I cried in the pharmacy parking lot. So yeah, I'm choosing to believe too. But the outside world wasn't as easily convinced. Business news outlets got wind of the story. The headlines were brutal. Chen Industries CEO gambles company future on naive social experiment. Billionaire's guilt trip could cost shareholders millions. Richard Chen, visionary or fool? Stock prices started to drop, 5% the first week, 8% the next. Investors were nervous. Some were furious. Richard received dozens of calls from major shareholders demanding meetings, demanding explanations, demanding he reverse course. His family wasn't any happier. His brother called, livid. Do you have any idea what you're doing to our family's wealth? Dad built this company. And you're destroying it for what? To feel good about yourself? To do the right thing, Richard said quietly. The right thing? The right thing is protecting what we have, taking care of our family. Not giving away millions to people who didn't earn it. They did earn it. They earn it every single day. We're the ones who haven't earned our wealth. We were born into it. His brother hung up on him. The criticism intensified. At a prestigious business conference the following week, Richard was invited to speak on a panel about corporate responsibility. He thought it would be an opportunity to explain his vision. Instead, it turned into an ambush. Mr. Chen, another CEO said with barely disguised contempt, your little charity project is admirable, but it's not sustainable. You're setting expectations that no business can meet. You're making the rest of us look bad. Maybe you should look bad, Richard replied. Maybe we all should. When we have employees choosing between food and medicine, we've failed. It doesn't matter how profitable we are. That's easy for you to say. You inherited wealth. Some of us built our companies from nothing. We understand what sacrifice means. Do you? Richard asked. Have you ever had to choose between insulin and rent? Have you ever slept in your car while working full-time? That's sacrifice. What you and I do, that's just business. The exchange went viral. Social media exploded with opinions. Some people called Richard a hero. Others called him a hypocrite. A trust fund baby playing at activism. The attention was overwhelming. Through it all, Maria worked beside him. She was learning fast, asking questions, pushing back when she thought he was being too idealistic or not practical enough. These housing vouchers, she said one afternoon, pointing at a proposal. This amount won't cover rent in most neighborhoods. I know because I tried to find affordable housing. This looks good on paper, but it won't work in reality. What would work? Richard asked. Double it, and partner with landlords directly. Give them incentives to rent to our people. Otherwise, they'll just pick tenants who don't need assistance. Richard listened and made the changes. Again and again, Maria caught things he missed. Understood nuances he couldn't see from his privileged position. You're really good at this, he told her one evening as they reviewed applications for the emergency fund. I lived it, she said simply. That makes me qualified in ways your business degree never could. 3 months in, the foundation had helped 63 people. Tony was in his apartment, working on getting his daughter through physical therapy. Diana's blood sugar was stable for the first time in 2 years. Robert had been able to move his wife to a better care facility, but the company's stock was still falling. They'd lost 14% total. Major investors were calling for Richard's removal as CEO. Board meetings had become battles. You have to stop this, Mr. Harrison said at yet another emergency meeting. The shareholders won't tolerate much more. The program is working, Richard insisted. Employee turnover is already down to 21%. Productivity is up. People are actually happy to work here. None of that matters if we go bankrupt. We're nowhere near bankruptcy. We're just making slightly less obscene profits. That's not how business works, and you know it. Richard looked around the table at the faces of people he'd worked with for years. Some looked concerned. Others looked angry. A few looked scared. "I know this is hard," he said. "I know we're in uncharted territory. But I'm asking you to trust me. Give this 1 year. If it fails, I'll step down. I'll reverse everything. But give it a real chance." The vote was close, 8-7 in favor of continuing. By one vote, the foundation survived. That night, Richard stood in his penthouse looking out at the city. Somewhere out there, Tony was sleeping in a real bed. Diana was taking her full dose of insulin. Robert was visiting his wife without fear of medical bills. And Maria's daughter, Isabella, was getting treatment that might save her life. Whatever happened next, Richard thought, that had to count for something. It had to. 6 months after launching the Chen Foundation, Richard sat in his office staring at numbers that should have terrified him. The company's stock was down 23% from its peak. 3 major investors had pulled out completely. His personal wealth had dropped by almost $800 million on paper, but that wasn't what kept him up at night. What haunted him was the email he'd received that morning from his brother, formal and cold. "The family has decided to pursue legal action regarding the misuse of family trust funds. You've left us no choice." His own family was suing him. Richard's assistant knocked softly and entered. "Mr. Chen, you have the employee town hall in 20 minutes. And there are reporters outside. A lot of them. What do they want?" Comments on the Forbes article. "You haven't seen it?" She handed him her tablet. The headline made his stomach drop. "The Fall of Richard Chen, When Good Intentions Destroy a Company." The article was devastating. It painted him as a naive billionaire playing at social justice while shareholders suffered. It quoted anonymous employees calling the foundation a publicity stunt. It featured interviews with business professors saying his model was unsustainable and would ultimately help no one when the company collapsed. Worst of all, it included comments from Mr. Harrison, his own CFO, barely hiding behind the phrase "sources close to the company," as he predicted imminent failure. "The reporters want your response," his assistant said gently. "Should I tell them you're not available?" Richard wanted to say yes. He wanted to hide in his office, away from the cameras and questions and judgment. But he'd promised transparency. He'd promised to face criticism head on. "No," he said, standing up. "I'll talk to them after the town hall." The employee meeting was being held in the main building's large conference center. Richard expected maybe 50 people to show up. When he walked in, the room was packed. Standing room only. Security guards, cleaning staff, receptionists, maintenance workers, administrative assistants. Hundreds of faces looking at him. Some looked worried. Others looked angry. All of them looked scared. Richard took the stage and the room fell silent. He'd prepared remarks, but looking at all those faces, the words felt hollow. He set his notes aside. "I'm not going to lie to you," he began. "Things are hard right now. Our stock price is down. We're losing investors. The media is having a field day tearing us apart. My own family is suing me. So if you're worried, I understand. I'm worried too." A murmur ran through the crowd. This wasn't the confident billionaire they expected. This was someone human, someone vulnerable. "I've had a lot of people tell me I made a mistake," Richard continued. "Business experts, financial analysts, people way smarter than me. They say what we're doing isn't sustainable, that I'm destroying the company trying to help you, and maybe they're right." The room got even quieter. Someone in the back coughed. "But here's what I know for sure. 6 months ago, Tony was living in his car. Now he has an apartment and his daughter is walking again. Diana was rationing insulin and slowly dying. Now she's healthy. Robert's wife is in a care facility where she's treated with dignity, and Robert isn't working himself to death at 71. 143 people across our company have been helped by the foundation. 143 lives that are better because we decided people matter more than profit margins." He paused, looking around the room. "So yeah, maybe I'm destroying the company. Maybe in a year we'll be bankrupt and I'll be known as the biggest failure in business history. But at least when I look in the mirror, I'll know I tried. I'll know that for a little while we did something different. We chose humanity over efficiency." A hand went up in the back. It was Carmen, a single mother who worked in housekeeping. The foundation had helped her with childcare costs. "Mr. Chen, what happens to us if the company fails? If all those investors are right and this whole thing collapses?" It was the question everyone wanted to ask but was too afraid to voice. "Honestly, I don't know," Richard admitted. I've set up the foundation with enough funding to operate for at least 5 years independent of the company. So even if Chen Industries goes under, the programs continue for everyone currently enrolled. But would I be able to start this somewhere else? Would another company hire people from a failed business? I can't promise you anything except that I'll do everything in my power to make sure you're taken care of. Another hand shot up. It was Walter, a night janitor who'd been with the company for 12 years. Why are you really doing this? No one does something like this without a reason. What do you get out of it? Richard thought about the question carefully. You want the honest answer? I found my cleaning lady sleeping on the street and it broke something inside me. I realized I'd been living in this bubble where I congratulated myself for being a good person. Because I wrote checks to charities, but I was blind to suffering happening right in front of me, people working for me, people depending on me, and I never saw them as human beings, just as workers. Just as costs on a spreadsheet, his voice grew stronger. What do I get out of this? I get to sleep at night knowing I'm not a hypocrite anymore. I get to look at Maria and see a person instead of just someone who cleans my apartment. I get to be part of something that actually matters instead of just accumulating more money I don't need. The room erupted in applause. Not everyone was clapping, but most were. Richard saw tears on some faces, skepticism on others. But mostly he saw something he hadn't expected: hope. After the meeting, Richard faced the reporters outside. The questions came fast and harsh. Mr. Chen, critics say you're bankrupting the company. What's your response? We're not bankrupt. We're profitable, just less profitable than we used to be. But shareholders are losing money. Don't you have a responsibility to them? I have a responsibility to everyone connected to this company. Workers, shareholders, the community. I refuse to believe I can only serve one of those groups. Your own CFO has said this model is unsustainable. Mr. Harrison is entitled to his opinion. But he's also wrong. We're seeing reduced turnover, increased productivity, and better employee performance. Those things have value even if they don't show up on next quarter's report. What do you say to other CEOs who call this naive? Richard looked directly at the camera. I'd say they're scared. Because if this works, it proves everything they've been doing is wrong. It proves you can be profitable and ethical, and that terrifies them because then they have no excuse. The clip went viral within hours. Social media exploded with debate. Team Richard and Team Reality started trending. Business schools began using Chen Industries as a case study in real time. But the backlash intensified too. 2 more board members resigned. A major client canceled a contract, citing concerns about company stability. Richard's brother appeared on a financial news program, calling the foundation a betrayal of our father's legacy. The pressure was crushing. Richard barely slept. He lost weight. His hair started showing more gray. Maria found him in his office late one night, head in his hands. You should go home, she said gently. Get some rest. Can't. Too much to do. Too many people depending on this working. Maria sat down across from him. Can I tell you something? Of course. Before you found me that night, I'd given up. I was done. I thought maybe Isabella would be better off without me, without watching me fail. I'd started thinking about ways to just disappear, make it look like an accident so she'd get my life insurance. Richard looked up, horrified. Maria, I'm telling you this because you saved my life, not just by paying bills or giving me a job. You saved my life by seeing me when I was invisible, by giving me back my dignity. She leaned forward.